ABC Listen. Podcasts, radio, news, music and more.
Jelena Dokic burst into professional tennis as a teenager. At 16, in her first appearance at Wimbledon, she astonished everyone by beating the then world number one in straight sets. By 19, Jelena was ranked number 4 in the world. Her strength and grit on the court were amazing to watch. But the media coverage of Jelena's athletic achievements always included reference to her father and one-time coach, whose aggressive, often drunken outbursts came to claim as much news space as Jelena's tennis. When in 2017, Jelena published her best-selling memoir, Unbreakable, she revealed for the first time the awful truth behind those headlines. Her father had physically and emotionally abused her since she was 6 years old and first picked up a tennis racket. He was brutal and cruel and utterly undeserving of a daughter like Jelena. In sharing her story with the world, Jelena began her journey into a new way of being. The years since haven't been easy, but they have brought more freedom and self-acceptance than Jelena had ever known. There's now a new documentary on Jelena's life and career, also called Unbreakable. Hi, Jelena.
Hi.
One of my favourite parts of watching the Australian Open over the last few years is your commentary and interviews with players. What kind of preparation do you do for that?
You do preparation, you do your research, and I think I'm very lucky that I absolutely love tennis. So I actually watch tennis throughout the whole year, and I love the Grand Slams. But yes, I definitely do my research, and even on the players that I might know, I still dig deeper. And
Are you someone who tends to over-prepare,
yes.
would you say, Jelena?
Yes. I always say, you can't go wrong with over-preparing. It's better to have too much than too little. But at the same time, yes, I think it's the passion that I have for tennis, that I have for interviewing and commentating. I think that that's really important if you're going to go into something, to really work hard and have that passion. And that's what tennis and TV and commentating is for me. And I'm extremely grateful to have that opportunity to do it.
Your on-court interviews are pretty special. How do you get those top players to open up and relax with you?
Everyone asks me that, and I have to be honest, I have no idea, because everyone says you get them to talk about things that are interesting and other than tennis. And I dig deep, and I kind of always go and look at it from my perspective when I was a player and what I felt like when I was interviewed on court. I know that the viewers and even people in the stadium have just seen the tennis match, and you do want to talk about that and hear what the player is feeling after winning. But I kind of also try and get something else, maybe something that people don't know and that even I don't know, what they like and maybe what they're into, or fashion or things like that. So I try to come up with different questions that would be interesting to the players compared to maybe media conferences where they might just talk about forehands and backhands all day, which is normal as well. And I have just been incredibly lucky to be able to now interview Serena Williams before she retired, Novak Djokovic as well, Arina Sabalenka, multiple interviews in winning her last 2 Australian Opens back to back. In fact, Serena Williams was one of my very first interviews ever. I cannot tell you how nervous I was, more than any match on Rod Laver Arena night session. So it's actually interviewing players and doing interviews in general is one of my favourite things.
How important was your friend, the former Australian doubles champ, Todd Woodbridge, in getting you to pursue commentary?
Extremely important. It was integral. He actually knew I was a little bit interested in commentary and TV because we talked about it. Actually, we had those chats about what's next and what I would like to do, and straight away on top of the list, commentary and TV was one of it. He was already in it because he retired 5-6 years before me, maybe even a little bit longer, and he went into that and he had passion for that. So he was already very established, and so from there he helped me and we talked about it, and he was an integral part of not just even my commentary and TV, but believing in me being able to do something with my story, being a speaker, being able to go and diversify and go into different fields.
Do you remember the first time that you picked up a tennis racket?
Yes, I do. I remember it like it was yesterday because that's how much I love tennis. I was 6 years old and actually just turned 6, and 2 months after my 6th birthday, I had my very first tennis lesson and I loved it. I was always very competitive even before that at school, I remember, and I always even wanted to get straight A's, and I was a very energetic kid as well, and I loved tennis for being kind of a physical sport. I loved hitting balls. I loved having targets to aim at, and straight away I remember I loved competing. And like I said, like it was yesterday, that's how much I loved it.
Why was it so important to your father that you become good at tennis?
I think my father, his inspiration was the 1989 French Open and the semi-final between Monica Seles and Steffi Graf. And he absolutely loved both of them and what he saw. And I think he saw that tennis could be a good sport for me. Very quickly, though, even as a 6-7-year-old, he saw the talent and he saw maybe that I could be good and that I was competitive. But it very quickly turned into tennis, look, is a sport where there is so much money, so much fame. And I always say anything, especially sport that brings a lot of money, I always say creates disaster within families and the circle of even people around you, coaches and support staff, because everyone wants a part of that. And we didn't have very much growing up. We grew up in poverty. He really saw it as a way out for the family. And he used to tell me that all the time already as a 8, 9, 10-year-old, all the time. And that if I don't make it, that the family is not going to make it and that I'm the way out.
Had he been violent towards you before you started playing tennis?
No, never. He never laid a hand on me before I actually started playing tennis. He was abusive towards my mother all the time, not even so much physically, but just verbally, emotionally, here and there. He would throw things around, and even simple things. If the lunch wasn't up to his standard, he would throw it against the wall. And I remember seeing that as a kid, but I did not have that kind of personal experience with him. When I would say I had some good memories with both my mum and my father early on. But when I started playing tennis, literally that day, the first day I had my very first tennis lesson, was the day that he beat me the very first time. So, yeah, it really, I think, shows that kind of already maybe even subconsciously and in the back of his mind, that was it. That was kind of what he really wanted to push me to be good at and to be that way out for him and the family.
And when that started, Jelena, did your mum ever try to stop him, try to intervene?
No, she didn't. She was also, like I said, abused herself. She lived with it, and she grew up without parents. Both of her parents had passed away by the ages she was 13 and 14, and she was raised by her half-sisters and had to move to a bigger city. And I know that she wanted to have a family, and if she was going to have a family, she was never going to let it fall apart, and she always wanted to keep it together no matter what the cost was. So, yeah, that's where obviously that kind of comes from. But she would be upset about it, but yeah, she never interfered. She never stopped him.
When you were 8, war broke out in Yugoslavia. What did that mean for your family?
It was a shock for so many people and so many families. And I remember it was like 11 o'clock at night, and my father just said, we got to go. And we left early the next morning with literally 2 plastic bags, my tennis rackets. And a lot of people did, and we actually all thought we would come back within a few months, that things would settle down. And I remember it was a huge shock because you're being all of a sudden going from your own home that you're leaving it and leaving actually even people behind. My grandfather, which I never saw him again after that, which really to this day hurts me. He was my favourite person and was always looking after me, and he was the only one that never allowed. And when he would see my father being abusive towards me, that he would step in aggressively and go up against him. That's the only time that my father would then stop. No one else could stop him. So for me, that was very hard. I never saw him again. He was killed in war a year later. And it's hard because you arrive into this new country, and my brother was 3 months old. I absolutely adore my baby brother, and you are kind of transferred from family to family that would take refugees in, but you couldn't stay for too long. It was a week at a time. And then we lived in a rat-infested shed, no heating, limited water. We were lucky if we had bread to eat. A lot of days we went hungry. Yeah, look, we would stand at the Red Cross. We would try and get some basics every single week, sometimes staying there at 4 a.m. because the lines were so big, people had nothing. So it was very difficult. Yeah.
Were you still playing tennis in that period?
Yeah, we found a way, not the very first first few weeks, but yeah, we found then a tennis club and I was playing, and then people would kind of where they could help out. I would get shoes or, from charities or again, families helping out. And so I continued playing tennis and playing tournaments and nationals and winning. And it was a few really caring people and coaches that would help as well. Yeah.
Your family then came as refugees to Australia in 1994. Do you remember arriving at the airport?
Yes, I do. I remember arriving at the airport. It was early in the morning. I remember, it's unbelievable. I remember all of these kind of really key moments. And it was like a sunny day. It was June, 21st of June. I remember the dates as well. It was amazing. It was so different though. It was a cultural shock. It's different when you come into a country that culturally is very different, but also I did not speak a word of English. My whole family didn't. And then that's a massive obstacle for an 11-year-old to then settle into school, society, tennis community. You straight away feel like almost you have to go into your shell. You don't understand anyone and it's hard to make friends. But straight away also I was bullied at school and in the tennis community. There was discrimination, racism. So it was hard. I learned English very, very quickly. Within a few months, I was able to really already speak English, which was great. But I loved Australia. Regardless of that, I really, really actually felt straight away settled really well. And it was, for me, straight away such an honor. I started playing tournaments very, very quickly, I remember. And it was, even though it was not an easy transition in the tennis community, I remember I just loved it. I felt like, I'm playing for Australia and one day I'll play for Australia. I was so motivated and excited.
Where did your mum get work when you first arrived?
She worked at a factory. She worked at the Tip Top Bakery. I remember that, and she did really long hours. My father would always be kind of following me, going to squads and doing. We couldn't afford private lessons, especially at the beginning, so he would do that when we found courts nearby. So I grew up in Fairfield. Yeah.
Was there any change in his behaviour in this new country, Jelena?
Yeah, he actually, when I go back, you feel like every single, let's say, year, even from the age of 6, he got more and more kind of violent and brutal. For me, I think the fact that also we had to move and we were refugees, and especially coming to Australia, he really didn't adjust, and he didn't like the fact that, he couldn't speak the language. It was a big adjustment. But outside of that, he became an alcoholic already. He was very violent. And he already, at the age of 9, 10, I was called the most kind of insulting and vile names. At the age of 11, I was kicked. I was beat up constantly. I was hit with a leather belt all the time, to the point of bleeding. At times, I couldn't even, or I was afraid to look at then those bruises in the mirror, and sometimes I would. There was not a centimetre of skin that was not bruised, sometimes to the point of bleeding. So it was, it was tough. He was getting worse, and I was very aware of that. I could feel that. I could really feel like also I was under a lot more pressure the older I got. Even the biggest thing was that I was actually winning. I was winning in Australia. I won the 18s nationals at the age of 11, and he was getting worse. That was the fact. He was actually unraveling, and also alcohol played a big part because his drinking got worse.
As you say, your career was really taking off. At 15, you were crowned world #1 junior alongside Roger Federer. You played that amazing first Wimbledon tournament when you were 16. And you started to make prize money, which, of course, as you say, had been part of your father's intention for you to have this success right from the start. You were on tour in Asia in 1998, the first time that you actually got cash from playing tennis. Tell me about the phone call you had with your father from the Bangkok airport.
Yeah, that's. I think that describes everything, that phone call and getting my kind of very first prize money from a WTA tournament where I qualified. And yeah, I was at the airport and he was with my coach at the time, Leslie Barry, who I absolutely adored. And it was him asking how much I earned. And I had to, in the middle of the airport, those days, especially if it was a little bit less money, we would get it in cash and we would get it in envelopes. And I had to take it out. I had to count it and let him know how much I earned. So it was things like that. You could see straight away that it was a lot of pressure. It was all about money. Yeah, I think it explains everything about him, the motivations, and even more so later. I really was, let's say, kind of that, maybe ATM machine might be the right word.
The second time you played Wimbledon, you made it to the semi-finals where you lost to world number one, Lindsay Davenport. Another amazing achievement. What was going on with your father at that tournament?
Well, even the year before, beating Martina Hingis, the world number one, I qualified actually, then beat another top 10 player in the fourth round, made the quarters. I was, already inside the top 30 for that next kind of Wimbledon. And when I was 17 in 2000 and already earning prize money, I had sponsorship deals and it was such a breakthrough and such a massive moment. And here you are as a 17-year-old making the semi-finals of Wimbledon, especially knowing where you come from and the hardship and the adversity. But you fight, especially as a kid still. And for my father, he literally looks at that result as such a disgrace and an embarrassment.
Even during the match, as it starts turning and you're not winning, were you aware what his reaction was? Like, would you keep your eye on him during the game?
I always did in matches. You could see it. I knew when he was angry, and especially if he would drink before matches, which was very often, and it was the same thing, that match. So I knew that if I lost, the consequence would always be even worse. And I knew that, and I knew during the match as well. It was a close first set. I lost the first set, but then I knew things were, they were going to be horrific. But what actually happened was he left the site. So I actually didn't get a beating this time, but he didn't allow me to come back to the hotel and to come back home.
How did you find that out?
Well, I could find him for a little while. Then I reached him on the phone, and then he said to me and was screaming and what a loser I am and that I'm an embarrassment and not to come home and not to even dare come to the hotel. So obviously I knew what that meant, because if I did, who knows what the next beating would look like, because already before that I had a beating where right before the US Open, he kicked me and punched me in the head so hard that I was left unconscious. So even daring to come anywhere near the hotel, it was like, no, I just can't do that. So I had to stay on the grounds of Wimbledon. I waited for everyone to leave. I stayed in the players' lounge. I hid in a corner and I was just going to ride out the night there. But the cleaner found me at 11:30 at night. She was lovely and she just said, what are you kind of doing here? I said, look, I have nowhere to go. I've got to stay here. She said, look, I can't do that. I have to let someone know. And of course I knew that. I said, no problem. Like you got to do what you got to do. So yeah, that was my celebration for reaching the semi-finals at Wimbledon. So I kind of was there. I got this medal for reaching the semi-finals of Wimbledon, which you get, and it was beautiful. And here I was with my racket bag and my medal in the middle of the players' lounge, everyone leaving. I'm a semi-finalist. I'm 17 years old. Even that tournament, a big prize money check, and I'm feeling like I am just nothing and so worthless. And like I can't, you just feel like, where does this go? Where does it end? But what can I do?
When you describe the violence, the abuse that you were receiving, that you were on the other side of from your dad, that you were bruised, you were being knocked unconscious, were there tennis officials or journalists, do you think, who had a sense of what was going on for you?
Yeah, I definitely know journalists and officials or people that were around and that even saw it. I don't think that's any secret. But I also say, look, it's okay. For me, what's important, and I went into my first book, Unbreakable, that's now 7 years ago. My second one came out last year. Now the documentary that's out based on Unbreakable, it was very important for me to go into everything actually with kindness and to go into it with actually positivity, even though it's a hard story to tell. But it was important not to have any hate, resentment and bitterness. And I went into Unbreakable like that because what I wanted was to maybe change something. I even say at the end of my first book, Unbreakable, and I kind of always say I had no idea what I was doing at the time. I was just telling my story. But very importantly, in the last 2 paragraphs, I say, if sharing my story helps just one person in some way, for me, it's mission accomplished. And that was my goal. Everything else, what I went through, even with the coverage, which was really just the headlines about him and calling him this crazy father, but no one really, on the other hand, maybe looking at what's going on with a 15, 16-year-old girl, and my brother was 8 years younger, so 2 underage kids going home with this person. They all did interviews with him. He was drunk. He was aggressive. This documentary really shows his outbursts.
When you look back at that footage in the documentary where, you're 16, 17 and your dad is losing his temper, really these aggressive outbursts, what do you see when you look back at you in that footage?
Look, again, I always said I don't want to feel sorry for myself. I don't want pity. I don't want anyone else to feel sorry for me. And even in that moment, and especially today, I'm not a victim. And that's very important. I didn't feel sorry for myself, but it was all about, what do I do next? How do I come out of this? That's why I left home at 19, because I didn't know if the next beating I was going to survive. And I could really feel the trauma, the pressure, the abuse building up. Nothing was good enough. And for me, I look at this, I look at this girl going, even today, she went through a lot and she was still kind of standing there with her head held high. I almost felt like, especially kind of in that moment, people not knowing the truth, everyone kind of going at me because of my father. They couldn't see the tennis player. They couldn't see the results. A lot of people, when my Unbreakable came out, actually said, oh my God, I didn't realise you were number 4 in the world. You reached a Grand Slam singles semi-final, Grand Slam doubles final. You had all these amazing results. That's because they were all focusing on him. And there's a word that one of the people that got interviewed uses in the documentary, which I think it really explains it so well. When I heard it, it really struck a chord. He said, Jelena's press conferences looked like hostage situations. And that's exactly what it was. I was between 2 lines in a lose-lose scenario where I had to say and do what my father said. If I didn't, like I said, my next beating when I get to the hotel room, I might not have survived. Or if I did, I would just want it all to end and I could have easily taken my own life because you just want it to stop because you're in so much pain. And then here I was knowing that the media, but also even sponsors, fans, that this was something so terrible what I was saying. I did not feel like this. I felt like the opposite. Everything I was saying, I was thinking, oh my God, this is just ludicrous because this is not me. I would never say this. This is not the person I am. So I was in kind of between 2 fires here in the middle with no way to win.
One of the times that came to a head was when your father decided you had to play for Yugoslavia, not Australia, which you didn't want and which your Australian fans were not impressed by. What was it like walking out onto the court in Melbourne in 2001?
I get emotional actually talking about this. I actually have said this to a few people and I see a shock on their face. But that, I think, explains just how much that situation has left a mark on me and how much playing for Australia and how much I love Australia meant. I would take all the abuse and even more just for that moment not to have happened. I loved playing for Australia. I loved representing Australia so much. I started representing Australia overseas when I was 13 on team trips. I played Fed Cup already at 15, Olympian at 16. I was so proud. You could see the passion when I won Hopman Cup with Mark Philippoussis. You could see, I think, the passion I had, especially in playing in front of my Australian fans. My first Grand Slam, I played 3rd round of the Australian Open as a 15-year-old. I loved it. And he, again, I don't even hate my father. I don't necessarily forgive him, but I don't hate him. But that moment, he really took a lot from me. He took me playing for the country that I loved. He took my fans from me in that moment, and everyone that I loved, and really was so thankful that they supported me. I had no choice. I had to do that in that moment, because if I didn't, he threatened me so badly in that moment that if I didn't say that in the press conference and go and change nationalities 24 hours before stepping on court for your first round at the Australian Open against Lindsay Davenport, the world number one, night match, Rod Laver Arena. And here I am going, this is just going to be horrific. But here you are sitting in a hotel room, and I'm going through this because of you, in fear that if I don't, when I come back to the room, you might literally beat me to death. So for me, that moment and changing nationalities, having to walk out in front of people booing me, I just wanted to disappear. I literally just wanted the ground to open up and for me just to disappear, never come back. It was hard. It was really hard. And I would take anything in this world. I would take all the abuse, anything, just for that not to have happened.
This is Conversations with Sarah Kanowski. Hear more conversations anytime on the ABC Listen app, or go to abc.net.au/conversations.
Jelena, tell me what happened in Moscow in October 2002.
Yeah, I already kind of felt for a while, for months, that I wanted to leave, that I wanted to escape. And at this point, try and imagine someone that is so scared of her father that just the sight of him or even hearing his voice on the phone, I was shaking. So for me, yeah, I decided that I was going to do that. So Moscow, the tournament in October, I decided to escape at 2:00 in the morning. Okay, I'm doing this. I'm escaping, and then I'll just deal with those consequences. But I'm not going back.
You slip a note under your mum's hotel room door.
Yeah.
And leave the hotel.
Yes.
Where did you go?
So I actually went to my next tournament. Flew to Monte Carlo just for that day. I knew then, obviously, just a couple of hours later, that my mum was going to get that letter. Spoke to her. She went back home to my father, and then I say, yeah, everything kind of goes downhill from there. My father showed up at the next tournament. I had to have security around me, and then from there I had security, which actually a lot of people don't know, for the next couple of years, on and off, 24 hours a day. He would threaten me, anyone that was around me or with me, all of these different things. I did try to actually kind of reason with him and stay in contact with him. I gave all of my, well, he was in charge of it anyway, but left all of my winnings and prize money and sponsorship money, which was millions, to him. I thought that would be, at least for a while, enough, because that's what he was motivated by. Even that was not enough, but he had to be in control of everything, of me and my life, and further winnings and further money that I was going to earn. So nothing was enough.
I guess the profile of abusers like that is, sure, he wanted the money, but he wanted power over you.
Well, I realise now, obviously, that I'm older and that I've done a lot of now not just soul searching, but talking to and listening to a lot of people and what domestic violence, child abuse, family violence is about. It is about that control. And sometimes it's not even about money. It is about that abuse. They are abusive. They need the control. It's putting you down, taking your self-worth, your confidence, everything away, and being in control of the situation, but being in control of you. And that's what he wanted. With every single part of my life, it was not even a joke that he said, I'm never going to have a partner or a boyfriend. This was literally like, no, you're not going to do that, or you're not going to have. I couldn't go. I remember I tried to reconcile 2 times after I left home because I thought maybe, a father would want to maybe have a relationship one day or settle down and calm down and look at it differently. And now that I'm an adult and I was still financing so many things for years later after I left. But it was the same thing. I would kind of get there and I couldn't stay with my mum in the city. It had to be where he was staying. Couldn't go to the cinema with my brother as a 22, 23-year-old. And I think that shows it all.
Incredibly, you were still playing tennis and eventually came back to play for your country, for Australia, and had an amazing comeback at the Australian Open in 2009. Was that a joyful tournament for you?
It was a combination, to be honest. I was so happy and proud. I was going, though, through already my own struggles with mental health. I did not know it at the time. I was already battling anxiety, depression, PTSD, an eating disorder. All of that trauma, actually, from the abuse was now starting to kind of bubble up and come to the surface. Yeah, I continued to play. I still, for quite a few years, was in the top 10, top 20, but I was just struggling. Tennis wasn't even on my mind. I don't even know, even in that moment, how I was still kind of playing, and I was just on tour. But came back to Australia, played the Australian Wildcard playoff to get into the Australian Open. I remember I wanted to already do it, actually, a year earlier. But I was afraid of the people's response and the crowd and just in general people in Australia, because no one knew, no one understood. Everyone was obviously very disappointed and bitter about me leaving. And here I was wanting to tell people everything that was going on, but I didn't have that kind of strength and courage at the time. I was still very young. But also that is where my purpose and what I want my legacy to be and my why today comes from, because in that moment, I did not feel safe. And like I had a safe space and environment to go, listen, this is what happened. To tell that to the media, to tell that to people, because there was so much judgment, shame and stigma and the perception, if you talked about that it was, oh, no, we don't do that. We don't cover the hard stories. We don't talk about the sad stories. Even 10 years ago, it was like that. Now, last 5, we're getting better because people are now, and women, speaking up. But I will never forget walking out at the Australian Open, my first round match, Margaret Court Arena, full. I was worried about the booing or something, even like one person, considering what happened a few years earlier with 15,000 people booing me on Rod Laver Arena after switching nationalities. But there were these amazing cheers, Australian flags, and everyone together going, Aussie, Aussie, Aussie. And I was like, that's it, I'm home. That was amazing. 2009 Australian Open run, we'll never forget it. But I had to retire very soon after that, injuries and surgeries as well, but most importantly, my mental health struggles. I was so drained, had nothing left in the tank. I was not going to be able to play tennis, and I had to make that hard decision and choice. And I actually spoke to Todd about this at the time as well. You make a choice and you go, I don't want to do this, but I have to.
Jelena, your whole life had been tennis to a degree from the age of 6. It had been how you spent your time, it was how you made your money, it was the focus of all your relationships. Once you retired, what did the future look like?
Future for me did not exist. It was dark. And to be honest with you, I am not sure that I saw myself surviving and being here today, if I'm being completely honest. I retired at the age of 29. I was deep in depression, anxiety, PTSD, my identity gone. Tennis was all I ever loved and knew, something that you do from the age of 6. And I was now in my house, not in my house, room, my 4 walls, in bed all day because I did not have the strength to even get up out of bed. And this was not even about tennis anymore or what I was going to do in the future, even work-wise, professionally. This was now about whether I was actually ever going to be able to live a normal life again and survive.
Many elite athletes have a difficult relationship with food, which can continue or really amp up after they stop competing. What other things have been at play, do you think, in your relationship with your disordered eating, what gets called disordered eating? What else has played into that for you in terms of your story?
For me, it was purely that was my safe space. And that's what I think most eating disorders are about. There's so many out there. So mine is a binging and starving eating disorder. For me, it started with just going and turning to food because I did not feel safe with anything or anyone else. You develop abandonment issues, the trauma, the fear. So you go to something that's safe. For me, there was nothing safe. And for me, food did that. And that was even happening during kind of the last part of my career. And you go, okay, I now actually have to step on the court. Then you go, okay, now I'm not going to eat. Then I starved myself at times, 3-4 days. Then I would binge again. And then it just got worse after I stopped playing tennis because you stop the whole training a lot and competing. So obviously my body size and body shape changed. But it was more concerning the fact that I emotionally had so much comfort and safety in food. That's what it was. And it's a complex thing to understand, especially people that don't understand it. But it is our safety. It is something that we feel like we've got control over, something that makes us feel good, even though, funny enough, we're not in control because we are out of control with the way that we kind of look at food.
As you say, it is so common. It's such a common experience for people, disordered eating. But unlike most people, you've struggled with this in the public arena where you've received all of this commentary about your body. How much more difficult has that made your recovery?
It was disappointing at times, very sad to see that. I would be lying if I said that a couple of years ago that didn't affect me. It did, especially knowing what I went through. But even if you don't go through anything and you are just someone that's a size 16, 18, 20, so what?
So what?
But also, especially because we know that actually more than 90% of eating disorders come from some kind of trauma, mostly in your childhood or anything that you're going through, or mental health illnesses. So that makes me then even more kind of, I can even say, even though I don't like to even use that word because I come from a place of kindness and I want to do everything I do with grace and just poise. But it made me angry because people are saying, oh, just stop eating, stop putting food in your mouth. Oh, you could stop eating for a bit. You don't get it. And I was thinking to myself, you just don't get that food for me was the only thing I had. I had no one. I had nothing. Nothing made me feel safe. I was scared. I was in fear for my life. And this is what I turned to. So then I had the strength in vulnerability to call out body shaming, which was about 3 years ago. I started that on social media, then publicly, which was great to see journalists and media jump on board straight away in a positive way and go, oh my God, someone's talking about this, because we, especially in a public eye, we kind of push it under kind of the rug. It's this big elephant in the room, which you go, look, we all get it. But everyone would say, you know what, you're putting yourself out there, deal with it. That it comes with the territory. And I was thinking to myself, you know what? No. Why should we take it? Why does it come with the territory? What, just because someone can sit behind a keyboard and write something? So I said, you know what? I'm going to do this. I'm going to call it out. It wasn't easy, I'm going to say. And wrote these social media posts and I showed the messages. And I even was very open with showing, yes, I'm a size 18 now. I was a size 2 and 4. So what? I'm walking out on Rod Laver Arena in front of 15,000 people interviewing Serena Williams. Novak Djokovic is a size 20, 18, 20. And you know what? If I'm okay with it, proud of myself that I'm still here today and I am not ashamed, why are you judging, shaming me and stigmatizing me? You're not talking about my commentary. You're not talking about my interviewing skills. You're not talking about my books on my writing skills. And you're not talking about me being a speaker. You're not talking about my struggles and now thriving. I always say I'm not even just a survivor, I'm a thriver. Why don't you talk about that? Is my body size really the most interesting thing about me? And that's where that comes from.
You say that the day that your first book, Unbreakable, was published was one of the happiest days of your life, that you were finally being able to tell your story and reveal the truth behind those years of publicity where people are only hearing it from your father's point of view. But although you'd told the story to the world, you still had to deal with the trauma yourself. And you had some tough years after the release of that book. In Christmas 2021, during lockdown, you and your long-term partner separated, which really broke your heart. Who did you call that night that you and your partner split up?
Todd. Todd Woodbridge, my friend, my mentor. Todd.
He's one of the heroes of this story.
Oh,
eh?
Todd is amazing, and he doesn't kind of give himself enough credit for it. Yeah, I called Todd because I was in tears, and I called him at a late time, and I didn't even think he would answer. And he just came from dinner, and the first thing he said, "What's wrong? What's happened?" He knew something was wrong, and he straight away said, "I'm going to come pick you up. You're going to come stay with my family, and you're going to do it tonight. You're not going to be alone tonight, and you're going to stay with us." Which I said, "No, it's okay. I'm going to stay at home. I'll see how I am tomorrow." I knew I was good enough for that night to still, even though it was a shock. But okay, I'm going to call this tomorrow morning. Get help, get a professional, because we were 2 days away from Christmas. So it was such a difficult time to find people to be there, even professionals with you in that moment. He organised it in the morning within an hour. He called everyone, just anyone that he could think of, for me to be able to speak a professional in that moment. And it really got me through that Christmas and that week, because I was going right into the summer of tennis. And yeah, Todd. Again, Todd.
And you, because you went through that incredibly busy work time, but once that ended, you were left with the pain and the loss that was there and started seeing a psychiatrist regularly. What have you learned about yourself through those sessions?
Well, you said it in the previous questions that even with the release of my book, so much came with it, including reclaiming kind of my life, my power, the power of truth-telling, and just the beginning of healing, but also really not being silenced for the first time. There's so much power in that, and the power of vulnerability and realizing it's a strength. But in that moment as well, there was a lot of soul searching. It was such a transition. It was very difficult because I've never lived alone in my life. In my ex-partner, we are on great terms, by the way. I do want to say that. He has been with me through everything. He was my rock. I dedicate everything to him because he's a beautiful person, beautiful human being with the best heart. And regardless of us split and just kind of growing apart, I will always say, never allow anyone to say a bad word. But for me, it was tough. I was alone, really living alone for the first time in my life, and I really saw myself being with him for forever, and it already felt like we were. We were about to start trying to have a family as well. So there was all of these things, but most importantly, it was a shock. It was grieving. Again, something I felt like these feelings returned of me feeling abandoned, which is what we kind of have when you've gone through domestic violence and haven't had a solid support system. And I kind of felt like if everyone ever leaves, he won't, or he will always be there. That's how we also always used to say to each other. But things happen, and that's okay. And he had to kind of go with his own path, and I completely understood that and do to this day. That's why we are on such good terms. And there was never any fights or anything, which I have to say, I'm so glad that a breakup after 19 years can go like that, and two people can still have so much love for each other. And it makes me emotional, makes me very happy that we are two people that can do that. But it was hard. I was grieving the relationship. I was grieving him, and all of a sudden you realize this is not the person you're going to be with anymore, or for the rest of your life. And you go, oh, new life. What happens now? Like, where do you go now? What's next? Personally, I was even worried. I had so much on professionally, which I was so grateful for. And I was thinking to myself, I really hope that this doesn't affect that, because I love what I do and I feel like I can make even more of a difference. This is now my legacy and my purpose. And I didn't want it to affect me personally, but then also in that way. And a lot of hard work with an amazing psychiatrist. I haven't even told him this. I love him. He's amazing. But not even just from a healing perspective, because he taught me so much about myself and how I can be okay and how we process emotions and how anxiety works. I had so much anxiety came actually back in an unbelievable way, and even discovered things that I have BPD, borderline personality disorder, traits of it. I've got anticipatory anxiety, which I didn't even know that you can have kind of that different anxiety, which is always anticipating the worst. Now, I knew I kind of had this, but when we split up and when he left, this just again got to the surface where it was now, okay, what's next? Who is going to leave next? What bad is going to happen next? I could envision literally from the things like I couldn't get on the plane. So I could like really clear images. This is what anticipatory anxiety is, of the plane crashing. That's it. I'm done. I'm getting on a plane that's now going to crash. I couldn't go to sleep and fall asleep because I thought I was going to die in my sleep. So this is the anxiety you have. So we worked on this and I didn't even know I had this. It brought so much knowledge and then the tools. But knowing it, again, comes with so much freedom. That's why I fight for that. I fight for the freedom of people having a safe space and an environment to talk, but not even if you're in a public eye, but with your friends, with your family, with your co-workers, because so much healing and good things come out of it. You cannot be I really believe, you cannot be a happy person, joyous, happy, free person if you can't be yourself and speak up. So I did that. I did that with, even Jess Halloran. She was with me through all that, who helped me write both my books and directorial debut with the documentary. She opened the door as well to really wanting to tell the truth and knew the background of my story and helping me through that. And that's what it's about. And that's where vulnerability again comes in, just like when you mentioned talking about body image, talking about mental health. If we talked about it 10 years ago and said you wanted to see a psychologist or a psychiatrist, people would label you crazy. Let's be honest. You talk about domestic violence or child abuse, you're victim blamed. You want pity. You want attention. So this was again for me going, you know what, I'm not okay. I want to get help. I'm not ashamed to say it. But those that shame you or judge you, they should feel the shame.
One of the things that you've really worked on with your psychiatrist and on yourself is self-worth. For so many years your validation came from tennis and your father saying that was your only sort of validation. So where does your sense of self-worth come from now?
Yeah, I had no self-worth, to be honest. That was one of the big things. I had to dig deep, especially to go into fields like commentary, TV, speaking, which I loved, but then I still had to get that self-worth and confidence to be able to do it and get up there and talk in front of people, which clearly you can now see I can't shut up and I can talk underwater. And I'm in fields where I better be able to do that. I'm known at Channel 9, Jelena can talk underwater, which I'm proud of. It's in a good way. So for me, yes, the part of that was finding my self-worth. And then I realized I actually never had any. And that's the consequence of family violence, of child abuse. So I had to shift that around because I was always looking for external validation, whether it was from my father, which never came, coaches, which I also had some really unhealthy coaches or not good coaches that would do the same thing, scrutinize me for everything, even tell me that I'm not worthy or, I can only play tennis, so I can't do anything else or after I retire. So I realized actually, you know what, I'm actually looking for external validation, what others say. And if I got even a little bit of constructive criticism or something that wasn't like a 10 out of 10, it would really affect me. For me, it was the end of the world. And then I realized, well, I can't do that. I've got to be able to find this self-worth where I actually feel like I'm good enough or worthy enough for even myself. I wasn't worthy enough for myself. It wasn't even about others or about my work or a job or something. It was for me. I couldn't look myself in the mirror. It was because I was afraid of myself and to look, and I didn't think I was worthy enough and good enough. So I said, you know what? I'm just going to go out there and hold my head high. I do not care what anyone thinks because what I think matters. So I started to actually turn it around and go.
Quite deliberately just change the script in your thinking.
Yes, very deliberately going. And I don't like, because again, always been told I'm not good enough. So I don't celebrate wins and things like that. So I go, you know what? You were number 4 in the world. Not bad, huh? Not bad.
Not bad.
Then I went and said to myself, you're commentating. You're commentating here. You're doing TV. You know what? You're doing a bit of speaking here. You wrote a book. But that's something to celebrate. So I was like, you're actually not that bad. So I started to turn it around and go, you know what? My self-worth is mine. I decide if I'm good enough, capable, what I can do, what I can't. Not some person, especially if someone doesn't know me. And I decided, you know what? It's nobody else's decision or business if I'm worthy. It's mine.
Early mornings used to be all about tennis training when you were competing, Jelena. Why do you get up early now?
Here's the thing. My late mother-in-law, she passed away 4 years ago from cancer. Amazing person. She took me in her home and her heart when I was 20 years old. She didn't have to do that. She was literally like my mum. And she always actually wanted a daughter. She had 2 sons. So she used to have pictures of me, my 2009 Australian Open run she said, bring the papers back. We had no idea what it was for. And she framed them. I had no idea she was going to do it. Amazing. She used to write my victories. And one big thing before she passed away that she wanted was for me to become a commentator and a TV personality. And she got to see that for about a year, so I'm very, very happy about that. This was a woman that went through so much, survived a war, lost everything, lost 2 brothers, almost died at giving birth to her first son. You would never know it. She lived with so much grace, dignity. I used to call it quiet strength. She was so kind and always worried about everyone else. She always worried about us, never about her. Even in her last days, she would ask only about us and how I'm doing, what I'm doing, and how everything's going. But this woman used to get up at 4 a.m. And from 4 a.m. to 7 a.m., she would have 2 strong coffees. And she used to write in her journal during that time, have her peace. We knew that she liked to have a bit of that quiet time. Actually, she used to pray a little bit and watch if it was the sunrise and listen to the birds. And I never understood it. And I swear I never used to drink coffee. I started drinking coffee because of her, just to see what it's about. And now I love coffee and I take a strong coffee. And now I see what it's about. That was her moment. That's all she needed. 2 coffees, a bit of peace, write in her journal, her thoughts, and that's all. And anything else that happened good that day, it was a bonus. So it's unbelievable how someone can be so happy with so little. And now I do the same. Even if I have a flight at 6 a.m., I get up at 3 a.m. to have that coffee. It's a non-negotiable. Even just 20 minutes, half an hour, non-negotiable. So it's amazing how people can leave kind of those role models that we have and heroes. And that's, I think, what this is all about, leaving a mark and legacy that maybe you can do that for one person.
Jelena, it's been a real honour to meet you and hear your story. Thank you so much for being my guest on
Thank you. Thank you for having me. You've been very kind and I hope we get to do it again. It's been an honour. Thank you for the conversation.
Jelena Dokic was my guest on Conversations. Jelena's 2 books are called Unbreakable and Fearless. And the new documentary on Jelena's life and career, which is in cinemas now, is called Unbreakable. This conversation was recorded on the lands of the Yagara and Turrbal peoples. Our executive producer is Nicola Harrison. I'm Sarah Kanoski. Thanks for listening.
You've been listening to a podcast of Conversations with Sarah Kanoski. For more Conversations interviews, head to the website abc.net.au/conversations.